Thank you, Hugh. Good morning. Welcome to today's Standards Committee of the City and County of Swansea. My name is Mike Lewis. I'm an independent member of the committee and currently chair. I'd like to welcome some attendees today. Mrs. Thomas, good morning, and Mr. McAndrew and Mr. Phelps from the Ombudsman Office for Wales. And I think we also have some members of the public here today, so you're all very welcome. As Hugh has just reminded us, the meeting today is being recorded and being live streamed in the interest of openness and transparency. Okay, if I can start, please. It's a little after 10. Apologies for the slight delay in starting. If I can start with agenda item 1, whether we have, please, any apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. I have an apology from Councillor Graham Thomas. If you recall, he declared a personal prejudicial interest at the last meeting, so he effectively was unable to attend on that grounds.
Thank you, Hugh. Okay, and then item 2, whether we've got any disclosures of any personal or prejudicial interests, please, in the matters before us today.
Yeah, I'll declare an interest, just a personal interest, just for the sake of having seen a number of Facebook posts over the period of time, and having, being a political member of the council as well, just to be on the safe side. But I haven't met anyone, Louise, for example, before. So yeah, just to be on the safe side.
And is that specifically in agenda item 4, Councillor?
Yes.
Hugh, any issues there? No? Okay, thank you. But thank you for that. Anybody else? No? Okay, thank you. Then if I can take us, please, to agenda item 3, and that is to approve and sign the meetings of the previous meeting as a correct record. And that is specifically the meeting held of the Standards Committee on the 23rd of June this year. I just wanted to clarify attendees, if I could, Hugh.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure.
Can I come in on that? Yeah,
Yes.
Thank you. There is an amendment needed to the minutes. Carlo Rabbiotti should be shown as having attended that meeting. So I will, subject to you adding his name to attendees, I move them to be a correct record.
Thank you, Hugh. So if I can take them, please, that's only a couple of pages. Page 1 for accuracy, please, subject to that amendment for attendees, and page 2. So we all happy that that's a correct record and happy to sign the minutes? Yep, thank you. Okay, so we're going to move to agenda item 4, which in a sense is the main agenda item for today. I will make some introductions in a second, but if I can ask, please, Mr. Adrian Jeremiah, who's a lawyer employed by the City and County of Swansea. Adrian, if you wouldn't mind, please, just taking us to agenda item 4.
Thank you, Chair. My report prepared in this matter is at pages 3, 4, 5 and 6. My report essentially presents to the committee the report prepared by the Ombudsman. I don't propose taking you through my report in any detail, or the Ombudsman's report in any detail. The committee is required to consider the report and make the determinations set out in paragraph 2.8.
Thank you, Adrian. Okay, so agenda item 4, as has already been explained to us, the purpose of this agenda item is for the committee to consider the report of the Public Service Ombudsman for Wales in relation to the alleged breach of the Code of Conduct by former Community Councillor Louise Thomas. I would like, if you don't mind, before I go any further, just to make introductions as to who's sat around the table today. I think that might be helpful to all the parties. Online, Michaela, forgive me, I should have checked earlier that you can actually see and hear us okay?
Yes, I can, thank you.
Perfect, thank you. So Michaela Jones is also an independent member of the committee. We've got Mrs. Janet Pardew-Wood, who is currently our vice chair. We have Mr. Mark Rees, also an independent member. We don't have online, as far as I can see, Mrs. Margaret Williams, who is also an independent member. So Can't record an apology for absence because I don't think we've had one, but just to record that she's not actually with us at the moment. And then we've got some councillor members as well. So we've got Councillor Oliver James, Councillor Mike Lewis, Councillor Graham Thomas has sent his apologies as we've already recorded, and Community Councillor Carlo Rabiotti. I don't think I've missed anybody out so far. And then also the committee will be supported today by Mr. Hugh Evans, who is the Head of Democratic Services, Mr. Adrian Jeremiah, who as I've already explained, is an associate lawyer with the City and County of Swansea. So those are the attendees in terms of the committee itself and the City and County of Swansea. You'll know Mrs. Thomas, you're very welcome this morning. Good morning to you. Certainly. Sorry, bear with me.
Apologies. I've just been made aware of a slight technical issue. Can I just check? So then give me one moment. Does that resolve the issue? We just wait for a response. Does that solve it? We can't see the image online of the chair, so I'm just getting that resolved. Give me one moment. Let's see what happens here. No. I'll move over so the chair will be caught on camera then.
Do you need Adrian to say where he is?
No, Adrian's fine. Stay where you are, Ed.
Yeah.
Apologies, everything.
Okay, apologies. So the other attendees today, Mr. Thomas, I've just welcomed you. You're very welcome. And I also want to welcome and introduce Mr. Lee McAndrew and Mr. Matt Phelps from the Ombudsman for Wales office. Excuse me. Okay, so the purpose of this agenda item, as we... The purpose of this agenda item, as I've already explained, is to consider the report of the Public Ombudsman for Wales. I hope it's helpful, just particularly to you, Mrs. Thomas, if I go through the procedure for today and explain what's going to happen, the various stages, so just to put you at ease as much as I can to explain the process. Would that be helpful? Okay. There are, and I think you've got a pack there, that we've deliberately produced a pack both electronically and now in paper. If I can ask you, please, to go to page 7 of that. Might just be helpful if I walk through the procedures before us. Okay, so at page 7, which I think is Appendix A from memory of the pack, this is the Standards Committee hearing procedure. And you'll see from paragraph 1.1, 1.A, 1.1b, that, if you like, are the steps that have led up to today. And today we are considering, or we're here because of paragraph 1.1b, where the Ombudsman's Office undertook an investigation, referred the matter to the monitoring officer of the City of Swansea, and that report was considered, which moves us on to paragraph 2, the initial determination, as it's called under the process. Okay, so upon receipt of a report from either the monitoring officer or, in this case, the Ombudsman for Wales office, together with any recommendations, the committee sat, as you've just seen from the minutes, we sat on the 23rd of June, I think it was, of this year, and decided that we received the report and decided that it was fair and equitable to give yourself an opportunity at this hearing to present your case and to respond to the report. And I just want to make make it clear that that's all we've done so far. That is where we are at this stage of the process. The meeting in June received the report and decided, the committee decided that we would give you the opportunity to appear before us in this hearing. Okay, that's all that's happened so far. But I think it may also be helpful if I explain the procedure that we're going to go through today, which is at starts at page 7. And indeed, I am required under the procedure to explain this, which I think is good practice. So we've already covered the referral received from the Ombudsman's office. You'll see that this particular procedure for this hearing falls into 3 stages. Stage 1, and that's under paragraph 10 of the procedure, is the finding of fact. So we will start in a couple of minutes' time, not quite yet, but we will start with establishing whether there are any significant disagreements on the facts in the investigation report. If the answer to that from both parties is no, then that enables the committee perhaps to move on. But if the answer to that question is yes, there are significant disagreements on the facts in the investigation report, then I will invite Mr. McAndrew on behalf of the Ombudsman to make representations to support the findings of fact in the report. He may call witnesses to provide evidence to support those representations. I will give you an opportunity, Mrs. Thomas, then to challenge or to comment upon those representations. What I would say, and I say this to be helpful to everybody in these circumstances, it will help your case if you decide to challenge or comment on something, rather than just saying, I disagree. We have got something like 340 pages in the pack, and we've done our very best as a committee to familiarise ourselves with that. It will help us, and it will certainly help you, if rather than just saying, well, I disagree, if you're able to take us to a point on a page in the pack, specifically page XYZ, I disagree because the committee may want to look at page XYZ because there's evidence which to the contrary. It will help you. The more specific you are in saying why you disagree with something, and I say the same thing to Mr. McAndrew when his opportunity comes. If there's something in the pack which says, oh, yes, but I would refer the committee, it will help you the more specific that you can be. The committee will also have the opportunity to ask questions throughout that process. Then the process flips. You, Mrs. Thomas, will have the opportunity to make representations for yourself and to call witnesses. And because we now flip the process, Mr. McAndrew will also have the opportunity to challenge and comment. And again, I would ask the same of Mr. McAndrew when we get to that stage, that he will refer us, if necessary, to any particular pages in the bundle. And again, the committee members may ask questions throughout that process. We will then give you an opportunity, once both those things have happened, Mrs. Thomas, to sum up your case. But I would ask you, please, to stay relevant to the issues before us today. And I'll say a little bit more about that in a second. At that stage, the committee will then retire and we will discuss just findings of fact. Okay, that is the end of stage 1, or that will be the end of stage 1. We'll then move on to, once we come back, we'll come back and go into stage 2. So we will announce the findings of fact and have decided those. We will then go on to consider whether yourself, Mrs. Thomas, has breached the code of conduct. Now, again, you can make representations at that stage specifically. So we've moved past the findings of fact. This is now moving on to the actual, whether there's a breach of the code of conduct. We will invite you to make representations. Again, we'll ask Mr. McAndrew to make representations. And then again, you can make final representations. That'll be the order of events. And again, the committee will be able to ask questions. We will then retire to consider whether there has in fact been a breach of the code of conduct as alleged. That will be the end of stage 2. Then, if appropriate, we will move on to stage 3. And I say if appropriate because we're not there yet. Okay. If, as part of stage 2, we decide that there has been a breach of the code of conduct, then the procedure will then be that we will consider what sanction, if any, should be applied. Okay. Mr McAndrew will start and make representations to the committee on what he feels should be an appropriate sanction for the committee to consider. I will then give you an opportunity to reply to that, and if you want to introduce any mitigating factors, any character references, etc. Okay. And again, throughout all this, the committee may ask questions of their own, and we will certainly be taking legal advice at that stage as to what is within our gift and what isn't within our gift, and what would be perhaps appropriate given precedent, etc. Okay, so we will take legal advice at that stage, and again, we will retire to consider whether we feel a sanction is appropriate. At the end of that, we will announce our decision orally. The written confirmation of that decision will be provided to the relevant parties within 10 working days, and obviously that includes yourself, Mr. Thomas. There will be you will have a right of appeal to the adjudication panel for Wales, but we'll cover all that when we get to it, and the details will be in the letter. So if we get to that stage, then we will explain that at the time, and certainly will be confirmed in writing for you. Okay. Can I help any of the parties with my explanation so far? Is that all clear in terms of the procedure? Just put your microphone if you wouldn't mind, please.
Procedurally fine. If I could have a copy of the bundle, because I'm not going to have the same page numbers as the committee. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, what I would say on the bundle before us, and it is a little confusing, forgive me. So because it's included in our bundle for today, papers and reports, etc., and evidence that has been used in the original report, you might find some of the pages have 2 page numbers on, which is slightly confusing. The ones we will be referring to today, for clarity, are literally the ones where it says page 204, page 318, whatever it is. Okay, so if it's just a number, then you can ignore that. It'll be the reference is where it actually says page, etc. Okay, if that's not clear, then certainly I will help you as we go through. Okay, so is that explanation clear in terms of the procedure, Mrs. Thomas? Okay, thank you. And before we go any further, are there any procedural issues that either of you want to raise at the moment? If you want to speak, perhaps I can remind you just to press your red button, please.
I'm just very interested in how many people are actually witnesses for the Ombudsman. I know that somebody didn't turn up. I don't know how if I can broach that now or.
Turn your microphone off, please. Thank you. I will come to that in just 1 second, because I want to clarify that on both parties as to who we can hear from today. But are there any procedural matters that I need to deal with today?
No.
From you, Mr. McAndrew, any procedural matters at this stage?
No.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we will, as I say, I am required under the procedure, but I think it's best practice that we walk through and everybody understands how the process will run today. I do want to say just a couple of things, though, please, before we go any further. The committee is aware that the background to some of the events and the issues that that have arisen, that have caused, that have been behind some of the events that have led to us being here today. The background to some of those issues, it was emotive, may still be emotive, and we do recognise too that there are strongly held views, and you might say genuinely held concerns on both sides of the argument. But it's also important, I think, and incumbent on me as chair to say, and I say this to help you, Mrs. Thomas, to stay focused on what we're here for today. The Standards Committee is only here, and our remit is only to consider the matters in the Ombudsman's report. Okay, so I do recognise, and the committee recognises, that there are strongly held views. Whether they were at the time, there might still be for some people, but a lot of that will fall outside the remit of this committee. The committee today can only look at the questions before us, and those questions are around the investigation report from the Ombudsman and whether there has been a breach of the Code of Conduct, and if appropriate, if we get that far, what sanction, if any, should apply. Okay. I also want to say I really do welcome members of the public here today. It's not usual. The committee doesn't normally attract an audience, but you are genuinely very welcome today. But I also think it's incumbent on me to say that the Standards Committee is being held in public for openness and transparency. We are live streaming as well, but it's not a public meeting. Okay, and there is a clear distinction. It's a meeting held in public. It's not a public meeting, and therefore I can't, as chair, allow anybody to speak unless you are one of the named parties, either Mrs. Thomas herself or the Ombudsman's office, or being called as a witness. Specifically under paragraph 9.2 of the procedure, you'll also see that witnesses who are going to be called later, and I will come to your point in a second, Mrs. Thomas, witnesses who are going to be called today are not allowed, I'm afraid, to remain in the public gallery until they're actually called to give evidence. The procedure was written before I think we moved into the technological age where we can live stream, so it doesn't cover the eventuality of, but hang on a second, can't they go outside and just watch it? But it's a matter of trust. It's probably a loophole in our procedure. So it's a matter of trust. We're not going to send anybody out there to watch anybody, but we would ask, please, as a matter of trust, that if you're a witness, and I will shortly ask you, therefore, if you're about to be called, to leave the room, but not, please, to watch on live stream. And I can't do any more than that other than to say that is what the procedure calls for, but I recognise that I can't actually police that. Okay, so I do want, and going to your point, Mrs. Thomas, I do want to clarify now what witnesses are intended to be called today. Perhaps I can start with you, Mr. McAndrew, please.
I only intend to call Councillor Sarah Keaton today.
You can just hold for 10 seconds, Councillor Keaton. For yourself, Mrs. Thomas, who do you intend to call today, please?
Sorry, nobody.
Okay, hopefully that was picked up on the recording. So for the Ombudsman's office, it's just Councillor Sarah Keaton, and Mrs. Louise Thomas does not intend to call any witnesses today. Okay, so therefore, if I could ask, please, Councillor Keaton to leave the room, that would be helpful. But we will, sorry, Mrs. Thomas, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I did note that Councillor Townsend-Jones was a witness, and whether or not you intend to call her back as a witness, because I know that is one of the prerogatives of this hearing, that you could call her. She's actually in the gallery, so what happens in that respect? Thank you.
Were you intended to call that councillor?
No.
I see no issue then that the committee wasn't intended, unless my colleagues disagree. I don't think the committee was intended to call her. Hugh, I don't see any issue there. No, thank you for clarifying, but it's just Councillor Keaton. Okay, we do have just a small procedural matter. I do apologise. So we're going to adjourn for 5 minutes. If I can ask you. Oh, can you stay? Yeah, there we are. Sorry, it's a technical problem, not a procedural matter, apparently. So we're just going to, if you just bear with us, sort out our technology again. You can stay where you are. Just bear with us, Michaela. We'll be back.
Sorry for this.
If it helps, at 8:30, we didn't have any cameras.
They were all working for the meeting started, so right, that's fine. And that resolved. That's
Okay, happy to proceed? Okay, I have just been asked to speak a little louder. The microphones, I think I'm right in saying, Hugh, they are for the internet, but they don't actually amplify within the room. Oh, they do as well. Oh, there we are. But I will speak up. Thank you. All right, then it's a gentle reminder to everybody in the room, if you're speaking, could you please speak as if we didn't have microphones? That's sometimes the guidance I give to people. Don't rely on the microphones. Project your voice as if you didn't have them. Mrs. Thomas, I do apologise. There was one thing I missed in my notes. I did mean to ask at the outset whether there are any issues we need to be aware of, whether we need to make any adjustments for you today.
No, everything's fine, thank you.
And the same thing for Mr. McAndrew. Are there anything I need to be aware of?
No, thanks.
Okay, but what I would say, I can imagine, Mrs. Thomas, there are places you'd rather be than today, sat in this room, and we are aware of that. We will do this as fairly, as equitably as we can. However, if at any time any of the parties want to take a break, we will try to find an appropriate juncture for that. So please don't, you've got water in front of you, but if at any time you say you'd like a brief adjournment, then we will absolutely try to facilitate that. Okay. Okay, so having outlined the procedure we're going to go through, then I think the appropriate time is to, well, let's start that procedure. So as I said earlier, the very first starting point of our procedure is to establish whether there are any significant disagreements on the facts in the Ombudsman's investigation report. I am going to refer us all, please, if I may, to the report itself. If I take us, please, to what I think is page 32 in the bundle. Okay, and it starts at paragraph 46. It's under the heading Undisputed Facts, and it goes on for a number of paragraphs to paragraph 55. So I think it's appropriate at this stage. Sorry, I should also have said this. It's a bit of a mouthful to talk in terms of former community councillor Thomas. So if you don't mind, I'm going to address you as Mrs. Thomas today. Is that okay? So, and again, I apologies. Despite all my comprehensive notes, I forgot that. But so for clarity, I'm going to address you as Mrs. Thomas, if that's okay. So I'm going to ask you, Mrs. Thomas, specifically to help the committee. On that page 32 in the bundle, there are a number of paragraphs in the report which talk about undisputed facts. Can I ask you to confirm, please, that you accept the facts as set out in those sections of the paragraph? I'll come on to disputed facts in a second, but can I just ask you to confirm, yes or no, whether you accept those as facts, please?
No, I don't. And I'm going to go to number 49, the two-stage test. I don't agree with that.
Okay, just that one, or is there anything else?
There is confusion over my, I think it's code of conduct training. I've checked back on my diary, and I did actually attend one training in June, which I've actually brought with me today as confirmation. But the email that was sent from Tracy Meredith was a different date, so I just want to clarify that with the Ombudsman. Thank you.
Okay, so for me to be clear, so you're now saying that paragraph 49 is incorrect. So let me read it out for the purpose of the committee. So none of the complaints made by former Councillor Thomas to my office passed the two-stage test and were therefore not investigated, as no evidence of a breach of the code of conduct had been presented. So just again, I'm trying to help you, Mrs. Thomas. So that is not saying, that's not asking you whether you agree whether the two-stage test was properly applied. It is my understanding, and Mr. McAndrew will correct me if I'm wrong on this, my understanding is that paragraph is simply saying that that is what the Ombudsman did, Mr. McAndrew, on behalf of the Ombudsman, applied the two-stage test to the 9 complaints, I think it was, and none of them passed. So he's not asking, the Ombudsman is not asking you to agree that that was right or wrong or fair or appropriate. The fact that you've been asked to agree or dispute, and it is open to you to dispute, that that is factually what happened, that the 9 complaints that you submitted, all of them were subject to a two-stage test, and none of them passed it. Am I correct in saying that, Mr. McGann? Is that what that paragraph is trying to say?
Yeah, that's correct. The complaints were assessed as part of the two-stage test, and none of them passed the two-stage test. That is a fact of what happened with those complaints.
Okay, so I'm good. Thank you. I just need your microphone to come off, although they've flashed. Thank you. So I'm just going to put that to you again, Mrs. Thomas, just for clarity. So I say that you're not being asked to agree or disagree that the two-stage test was fair or it's the right thing to do. It is just whether you agree that factually that is what the Ombudsman did in response to your 9 complaints.
Okay, agreed. Yes, I do.
Sorry, I'm now forgetting my own rules. I'm not putting my microphone back on. So you now agree that that is what factually happened.
I do, yes.
Thank you. But you also went on to talk about attending one code of conduct training event. Where in those, just help me again, this is a real good example of which paragraph are you referring to, which you say that's incorrect? Just
Number
me.
47.
Thank you. So again, for the purpose of the those that didn't catch that, that was paragraph 47, which is being challenged. Okay, so again, later, we might ask you please to, if you've said that there's some evidence in the pack, we might ask you to produce that. But it's just established at the moment what our starting position is, which bits of it you agree with and which bits you disagree with. Okay, but apart from, you've now accepted paragraph 49, paragraph 47, you say perhaps is not factually correct in terms of you did attend one code of conduct training event. Apart from that, are those other paragraphs now accepted by yourself?
Yes, they are.
Thank you. And just flipping over the page to paragraph 56. At the time of writing the report, that was a disputed fact between the parties. So again, just for clarity, I'm going to read that out. Did Councillor Erasmus attend the vote count and ignore former Councillor Thomas as alleged? Is that still in dispute between you, or do you now accept that Councillor Erasmus did not, in fact, attend the vote count?
I accept that she said she did not attend. So yeah, that's accepted.
Sorry, for clarity and to help the committee, that's not quite the question. Because I think what you've said there, you accept that she said she didn't attend. That's not quite the same as saying, do you accept that she didn't attend? So do you see the distinction between accepting she said it and accepting she wasn't there is a slight distinction in fact.
Okay, I accept she didn't attend.
Thank you. That's helpful. Probably not at this stage, but I do want to make sure before, because this is the finding of fact stage. And perhaps, Mr. McAndrew, I'm going to put you on notice. You can perhaps help us from your notes. That paragraph just talks about the vote count. It would be helpful from anybody that can help us in the room, the date of that vote count. I think I know it, but it doesn't actually contain it in that paragraph. So I would just want us to be crystal clear as committee, please, when we come to it, as to what the date of that vote count is. Okay, so there is only one fact that is now in dispute, and that is actually around not the attendance of the vote count by Councillor Erasmus, but it is actually the attendance on the Code of Conduct training event. The process says that I should invite you yourself, Mr. McAndrew, at this stage, if there were any disputes of fact, to make representations. You've heard what Mrs. Thomas has said, so there is only one fact that is now in dispute per se. Are you in a position to respond to that now, or do you need some time to check your notes?
On the disputed facts, I've not prepared for that because obviously this is new information this morning. But I have prepared to talk the committee through the report, so I'm prepared to do that if the committee would think that was helpful for me to do. I would need to have a look through the appendices in relation to the now disputed fact, the new disputed fact.
Thank you. Is there anything, Mrs. Thomas, in the pack? You said that you dispute that one paragraph, which was, what did we say, it was 47, wasn't it? Is there anything in the pack that would help the committee to establish whether you did or did not actually attend that code of conduct training event?
Sorry, could you repeat that for me, please?
Certainly. So part of our difficulty this morning is we can only really look at the evidence in front of us and the evidence, because in fairness, that's what you've prepared on. So I would look over my metaphorical glasses now if Mr. McAndrew was trying to introduce fresh evidence. So in a sense, I'm trying to bring fair play, which is if it's before us and you can refer us to it, then that would help the committee. If it's something which you haven't already submitted to us, then we may struggle. I might take my colleagues' views in a second, but we might struggle to take evidence that isn't currently before us. So is there anything in the pack? If you say that paragraph 47 is incorrect and that you did in fact attend one of the code of conduct training events, is there anything that you can take us to in the pack that will help us to establish that particular discrepancy, please? Just while you're looking, Mr. Evans might be able to help the committee in this respect, Mrs. Thomas. So the suggestion is that perhaps we're all agreed, but we're perhaps expressing it slightly differently. So I'm going to bring Mr. Evans in.
Just to assist, paragraph 47 is quite clear that the Ombudsman states that former Councillor Thomas didn't attend the One Voice Wales training course. You referred earlier to something by Tracy Meredith, which wouldn't be nothing to do with One Voice Wales. And I suspect you might be on cross purposes, but yours is specific about One Voice Wales. Yours is specific about Swansea Council, and that might be your simple explanation.
Absolutely, yes.
I'm grateful, Mr. Evans. That is sorry, and I didn't pick up the distinction. So does that help, Mrs. Thomas? Do you now accept that, as written, paragraph 47 is correct?
Absolutely, yes.
Perfect. Thank you, and that's really helpful, Mr. Evans.
One point, sorry to interrupt you. The wording of it was did not attend training on the code of conduct, even though she'd been booked onto One Voice Wales training courses. So the Ombudsman saying she didn't attend any training on the code of conduct. So that would also cover training by the council. It was just that the clerk of the council had pointed out that she'd been booked onto One Voice Wales training courses and hadn't attended. So this feels like it's still a little bit in dispute because the Ombudsman is not just referring specifically only to One Voice Wales training, but any training on the code of conduct.
Then we're back to where we were a couple of minutes ago, Mrs. Thomas. Is there anything in the pack that will help us, please, in the sense of whether you did actually attend any code of conduct training?
If you can find the email from Tracy Meredith, which I think you're referring to, aren't you? And obviously you put in the pack. I can't find it in this pack, unfortunately, but it is in the Ombudsman pack. Tracy Meredith stated that I'd gone on the 2017 to 2020. There was 2 code of conduct meetings and training, and that I did not attend. I was not a community councillor in 2020, so I wouldn't have been attending any of those. And that's what I'm referring back to. Thank you.
I'm really sorry. Now it's my lack of understanding. So is there a specific date that you have in mind that you say that you actually attended a City and County of Swansea or Community Council training event? Is there a specific date that you have? Because it might be that Mr. Evans can check using his magic computer. It might be that we can check that.
I was never invited to a City of Swansea code of conduct training ever. So I don't know.
Okay, then forgive me. I just want to make sure I've absolutely understood what you've said. So I thought you were saying a couple of minutes ago that you did attend one code of conduct training event. Is that correct? And if so, by whom, in what circumstances, on what day? Just help me, please. I'm just not quite getting what you're saying.
I'm just going to go back to my calendar. Bear with me.
I don't know whether it helps address the point for you, Mrs. Thomas. If you look at page 92 in the pack, I'll just give you a couple of seconds, a couple of minutes to read that. To page 92 appears to be an email from Tracy Meredith, who is our Chief Legal Officer and Monitoring Officer. Just have a little look at that and see whether that helps you.
Yes, it does. Again, Tracy Meredith said I did not attend a community town forum on 2017 and 2020. And she said there's no record of the former councillor having attended either of these training events. That's because I wasn't a community councillor at that date, those dates.
Okay, Mr. Evans can help us, I think.
Yeah, a point taken there. First of all, Swansea Council would not know the dates community councillors were co-opted. If you were elected following an election, we would know, but there's no duty, no legal duty on the clerk or a community council to tell Swansea Council. So Tracy Meredith wouldn't have known if you were a councillor or not. What she's making in that paragraph, what the point she's making in that paragraph is, she ran 2 sessions for all community town councils at those particular times, and the clerks should have forwarded that to all community councils at that time. If you weren't one, you wouldn't have been invited. That's the clarity there.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Evans. Does that help you, Mrs. Thomas?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay, so again, I'm giving you every opportunity. I just want to make sure that I'm being completely fair to you. So are you saying that there is a date in the pack where you can put, if this is what you're saying, are you saying that there was a code of conduct training event that you attended? So that's the first question. Is that what you're saying, that you did attend one code of conduct training event? And if so, is there anything before us that will help us to evidence that and give us a date?
All I know is remote, and it was around June 2021. That would help.
Okay, thank you. But as far as you can tell this minute, nothing in the pack that will help us with that. Okay, thank you. Okay, let me just check where we are in the procedure, because I absolutely want to make sure that.
So
Sorry, Mark.
is it appropriate for me to ask Mrs. Thomas a question about this specific thing about council training? I can see something in the interview that was undertaken with the ombudsman.
If it's helpful to address the point, then by all means,
Okay.
leave Mrs. Thomas to it, Mark, please.
In the pack, page 126, which is the Ombudsman's interview with yourself, Mrs. Thomas. It says about halfway down the page on page 126, during your time on the council, did you undertake any training on the code? You said no. Is there any reason why you didn't? You said just work. I work full time. I just didn't have the capacity to go on these courses. It's been, I'm quite busy at work. So when the Ombudsman looked into that, you did actually say you hadn't taken part in any training.
And I didn't realise when I looked back on my calendar that I had those booked into my calendar, so I hadn't got access to it. So at that time, I didn't know all the dates. I mean, I am so busy. So you know, at that time I said no to him, but when I looked back, I realised there was 3 entries into my Outlook calendar that basically stated the training schedules, and that Steve had put me on to, sorry, the clerk of Mumbles Community Council. So at that time I said no because I didn't have confirmation. So I'm sorry that that's confused everybody.
Chair, could I respond on that point, please?
Yes, if it helps the committee.
Yeah, if you turn to page 74, which is the email to the Ombudsman from the clerk. On this point, he said she, being Mrs. Thomas, requested the training, and I booked her onto the course, and the details were sent to her by One Voice Wales. But as the email supplied indicates, she did not actually attend the training, nor the other 2 courses she was booked onto. So she may well have had 3 diary entries in her calendar, but the clerk has indicated quite clearly that she didn't attend any of the 3 courses.
Thank you, Mr. McAndrew. Do you want to respond to that, Mrs. Thomas?
I'm sorry, but I did. And I've got the information on my calendar. So I am disputing that. And I'm, you know, that's what I'm going to do. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. We understand your position on that, Mrs. Thomas. Okay, I just want to perhaps I'll look to my legal colleague in a second to make sure we stay on process. So the process, as I've already explained, requires the committee. This is still in the finding of fact section on stage 1. So if there were any significant disagreements on the facts, this is where we would normally call witnesses. However, with the exception of whether or not the code of conduct training event was attended, and I understand and respect that. Apart from that, I think Mrs. Thomas, you're saying that every other fact has been accepted. So I'm looking to my legal colleague as to whether we actually need to call any witnesses at this stage, or at least whether the Ombudsman needs, because that would normally go to supporting evidence for the finding of fact stage, wouldn't it?
Yeah, you're correct there, Chair. I don't think there are any witnesses who can give evidence other than what we've heard from Mrs. Thomas and Mr. McAndrew as to whether or not there has been any training. So my view is that you can now proceed to the next stage and make a decision after considering and having to think about it.
Okay, so, and again, I'm just trying to be desperately fair to everybody, Mrs. Thomas, so forgive me if I just worry about the procedure for a second. So there's nothing in our procedure other than stage 1, which says that the committee can call witnesses. You're not calling any witnesses anyway, Mrs. Thomas, so I perhaps need to look to you then, Mr. McAndrew. If we don't call Councillor Keaton at this stage, is the committee going to be helped at all, given where we are in terms of the Mrs. Thomas's position on the finding of fact? Is there anything that Councillor Keaton can help us with, or can I just take the committee to retire to consider the finding? I want to be desperately clear that I want to be desperately fair to everybody at this stage. Is there anything that Councillor Keaton can help us with that is still in dispute? I suppose that's the way of expressing it.
Could I clarify? So if we, once we've agreed the facts, move on to the second stage, there's no grounds within the procedure to call Councillor Keaton as a witness under stage 2 of the procedure. Can I clarify that first, please?
That is what our procedure says, I believe. I will look to my left. However, there is also flexibility built into the overall procedure, which says in the interests of justice and natural justice, it is open to the committee to apply this fairly. So I think there is flexibility that if the interests of justice are served, then that flexibility, we have flexibility in terms of how we run this process. So the process is there. I'm delighted to say we don't use it very often. That is, it's rare for us to have this type of hearing, and that's a good thing. And it might be after this that we reflect on the procedure to see whether it can be improved for the future. So I will look to my legal colleague. So I think the answer is not under the procedure, but we've got flexibility. But my question would be, how would calling any witness help the committee with the issues before us? I think that would be my question if and when we get asked that question. But I will look to my legal colleague.
So the authority's procedures provide for disagreement of facts being resolved at this stage by witnesses being called. The procedure also does give the committee some flexibility. Paragraph 10.8 refers to the authority being able to question any of the people involved, or who at any time the committee may question any of the people involved or who are given evidence. So after the facts have been decided upon under stage 1, the procedure still does give the committee at any time to the ability to ask questions of any witness they see fit.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. So I'm going to look to my colleague members. Unless I'm really missing the point, I think we're at the stage where we've established where we are in terms of significant disagreement of facts. So I think we're in a position where we can now retire to make our decision on those findings of fact, unless any of my colleagues have any questions that they want to pose to either party at this stage. Councillor Mike Lewis.
Yes, I just wanted to ask. So sorry, I just wanted to ask Democratic Services. Can we clarify the position that Mrs. Thomas has stated, that she did in fact attend a code of conduct training, and if it and just for my this code of conduct training being online, and was it with One Voice Wales or was it with Swansea City Council? For my clarification and everyone's. Thank you.
I'm going to bring in Mr. Evans to see whether he can help us with that.
Okay, as we speak, I've got colleagues looking for the dates of training during May, June and July 21. I've also asked them to look at the same months in 2022 as well, just to help. Obviously, that'll take a little bit of time. I've also reached out for One Voice Wales for their attendance records. I haven't had a response back, but in all fairness, all this is in the last couple of minutes.
Okay, thank you. Again, looking to my colleagues, are there any other questions that we have for any other parties before we retire at this stage? I'll come back to you in a second, Mr. McKenzie.
Yes, Ms. Thomas, I just wondered if there was any certificate or something that you received for attending this training?
No, because it was in the sort of COVID time, everything was online. So we were just given a link and went into the training via that way. And it was remote, it was on my phone. So I remember I've got the details on my phone. So if you need that for clarification, I don't know. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any other colleagues, Councillor?
Just a small point. Would this, again, to Hugh Evans, would this have been recorded as we are recording the session now?
I can't guarantee that it would have been, so I'm not going to say yes or no on that. Obviously, my staff are looking to see what was available, what did occur, what training was offered during those periods. It may have been recorded, it may not have been recorded, so I can't guarantee that. But I think the issue is whether the One Voice Wales one was attended or the Swansea one. But as soon as I know anything, I'll let you know. But I should say all councillors must sign up to the code of conduct regardless of whether they're trained in it. So the duty is unchanged whether there's training there or not. And I need to make that point.
Thank you, Hugh. Any other questions from colleague members before I move on? Okay, I did just have one, if I may, Mrs. Thomas, and again, this will help the committee, I think. Can I take you, please, to page 270 of the pack? Okay, so page 270, this appears to be an email exchange from Mr. McAndrew to yourself And Mr McAndrew starts with, I'm writing to confirm that the Ombudsman's draft report was issued to you for comment on the 21st of February 2023. Any comments that you may have are due by no later than 14th of March. If we do not hear from you, then we will assume you have no comments to make. And if I can before I come to the question, the page before that, which is page 269, I believe. Yeah, page 269. At the bottom of that page, good morning, Lee. Sorry, I have not replied. I've had far more important things, etc., etc. Can I just ask you, please, to confirm what appears to be the case in the pack, that appears to be an email from Mr. McAndrew, and that appears to be your response of the 28th of February 2023. Can you just confirm that that is my understanding, please?
It is, yes.
Okay, so could you just help the committee? I do accept that, we are trying desperately to check whether there's any independent evidence that you did attend the course, and we will do that because it's a finding of fact. But help the committee, please. From that email, it appears you had the opportunity to challenge this at the time. What was the reason you didn't?
So during that time, I wasn't in Wales. We'd moved and we lost our father-in-law. So I was helping my mother-in-law with various things that were happening within the family. So if you can appreciate, it was quite a stressful time. And I just did not have that time. I worked full time. And obviously we were back and forth to Wales, helping her with everything that was going on. So.
Thank you for clarifying, and my condolences for the loss, even though it was some time ago. Okay, anything else from any of my colleague members before we retire? Mr. McAndrew, I noticed you did signal a couple of minutes ago and I ignored you. Did you want to come in still on this point? Anything to help us?
I would just say that this is it's not a key disputed fact whether the training was attended or not. And it would only really be referred to today as an aggravating factor at stage 3 of the procedure. So I wouldn't get too hung up on this disputed fact. But I would say that the evidence in the file is compelling that the training was not attended. It may well be in the calendar because the invites were sent, but the clerk was very clear in stating page 74 that the training was not attended. But like I said, I don't think this is a key point that we need to dwell on too much.
Yeah, no, and I'm mindful. As I'm hopefully demonstrating, I'm very keen that the process is done fairly, and I'm giving you every opportunity, Mrs. Thomas. But when we get into our deliberations, then the extent to which this particular question in dispute is key to the question before us, that is something that we will deliberate as well. But yeah. Okay, then if there are no further questions, I'm going to suggest that the committee at this stage retires to consider our findings of fact. I am going to ask, please, that the public gallery and yourself, Mrs. Thomas, and the Ombudsman leave us at this stage. I don't have an indication of time, but we will call you back as quickly as we can. Mr. Evans is saying if you could go back, please, to the rooms you were allocated earlier, we'll know where to find you. And I'm going to ask Mr. Evans in a second to stop the live streaming, please.